Welcome, everyone, to this briefing brought to you by the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF. In Hebrew, name is Bitronistim. IDSF is the leading Israeli organization advocating for strong national security to defend Israel. It's a great privilege to have with me today on this briefing Danny Seaman. Danny, you're no stranger from these briefings. Thank you so much for joining.
Always a pleasure.
Danny, let's jump right into it. Today's October 8th. It's a very meaningful day, as we'll discuss the symbolism of October 8th now in Israel. After the Holocaust, there was a phrase that was termed never again. So I want to ask you, Danny, after October 6th, 7th, and 8th, what does never again mean to you?
I think you can see it right now. And it's the fact that you don't mess with Israel. And that's the easy answer, but the realism of it is that unlike generations of Jews and unlike the Holocaust, in which we were helpless victims, now when we're attacked, when we're assaulted, and by the way, there's nothing new in what happened. They make new excuses, but this pattern has happened before, and in Europe, in Arab countries, but in the past, we couldn't defend ourselves. After the Holocaust, and in the 75, 76 years of the existence of the State of Israel, and especially this past year, we have made it very clear to those who are trying to destroy the State of Israel that never again is now. Never again is when the Jews are capable and unabashedly and unshamefully capable of defending themselves.
Thank you. It's a powerful message, and it's a practical message, because never again is very elusive. What does it mean? What do you do with that? And you're saying we see here in Israel tachlis.
Well, unfortunately, for a lot of Europeans and a lot of international countries and people, it's to them, never again means having a solemn ceremony in the memory of the Jews. Well, I'm sorry we didn't give it to you in the past year. With all the pain and everything we've gone through, to us, never again is not you mourning us, but us defending ourselves.
Very important. Okay, Danny, let's backtrack for a moment if we can. Yesterday, October 7th, was a day of mourning across Israel, a day to really remember the fallen and the great massacre of Hamas on October 7th and the failures of October 7th. And October 8th has now come to mean something else. I remember last year on October 8th, you and I talking, and there was just so much uncertainty. We didn't know what was happening. That which we knew was not even a piece of the bigger picture. There was a lot of concern, worry, pain. And as more information came out, those weeks were very difficult weeks. But October 8th has morphed into something else right now. Tell me, what does October 8th mean for you?
I think to all Israelis now, it means that, as we said before, never again, and never again is now, and we understood that. And October 7th was a day of dismay, a day of a lot of the things that many Israelis believed for a long time. I don't want to say all Israelis, but it was that belief for a long time that if we just want peace, if we just put our hand out for peace, and then they accept it. And I know, working on behalf of Israel for many years, and those who are my age remember when we were told, if we just recognize the PLO, we'll have peace. If we cede territory, there'll be peace. Well, Israel did all of that over the years. And not only did we not have peace as a consequence, but this peace and this attitude on the part of Israel was manipulated and taken advantage of by the enemies of Israel, who used every one of our sincere interests for peace to develop and build this whole basis of an assault against the physical existence of the State of Israel. In Judea and Samaria, in Gaza, and we know as well in Lebanon. And it's not only that they're proxies of Iran. Iran is funneling a lot of money into it, is giving a lot of assistance to it, but it's extreme Islam, and it finds itself in its expression through Palestinian identity, which there is no Palestinian identity. The only thing that exists as Palestine is the willingness or the desire to deny the Jews the right to the State of Israel. That's all it means. There will never be a Palestinian state, even if Israel does not exist here, because the Arabs have no interest in it. And we're seeing that now. So this sort of came to last year to the point where, maybe a bit prematurely, and I can say that it now seems that October 7th ended up being a lucky day for us, with all the pain and everything, the price that we paid and the horrors that we experienced. We know right now, based on everything that we're discovering in Lebanon and everything that we know that the Iranians were planning, it could have been 10 times, 100 times worse. And the fact that they prematurely attacked us then, with all the pain that they caused us, we still were able to gather ourselves up and rise to the occasion. And I just summarize this by saying our generation, regardless if we were right wing or left wing, our generation failed this generation in Israel. And this generation in Israel are standing up and defending us. We did one good thing. We brought up these kids who are so wonderful right now and doing everything to get us out of this situation and bring Israel to what it deserves to be, a strong, determined country and unified. Don't listen to what you hear in the media. And I know we'll touch upon this in a few moments. Ignore the media. Listen to what Israelis are saying. The Israelis are unified in their goal, know what we have to do, are not afraid to do it, are willing to carry whatever burden we have to do with this, understanding. And by the way, citizens in the South, just like the citizens in the North. And I mention the South because in the 20 years since the Lebanon War, since the last Lebanon War and war, since we left Gaza, in the 20 years since we left Gaza, there were 17 rounds of violence. And every time the population in the South would say to the governments of Israel, don't stop, keep going. And we didn't. We allowed international pressure and other reasons to stop it. Now we finally reached that point where we're not stopping. And the same thing now, the population in the north of Israel are saying, somebody I see just wrote this here, finish the job. That's what Israelis want. We don't want to continue living under threat. Now we know there will always be those seeking to destroy us, but limit their abilities to disrupt our lives. And that's what we're doing at the moment. And that's October 8th.
Danny, let me ask you a tough question. You've been in Israel longer than I have. You've been through more wars than I have. October 6th, 2023 was a day of failure, which led to October 7th. But October 6th, 1973 was also a day of failure. And I'm curious to know, in the aftermath of the Yom Kippur War, was this October 8th mentality around? Did people say never again? We're not going to be caught off guard. We're going to be strong. And then 50 years later, we slipped? Or is something different now within Israeli society, and this October 8th mentality is stronger than it had been?
That's I do remember, because I was 2.5 years in Israel at that time. I was a kid. I was around my bar mitzvah. And I think that's when I really became an Israeli. And we lived in a neighborhood of Olim Chadashim, immigrants in Ashkelon. And I think that's when we all became Israelis. We understood what it meant. But it was very different, because Israel was attacked, but unless you were in the army, you didn't realize the threat to our existence at that point. The public didn't feel it. The public, we had sirens, we had explosions. Slowly and surely we understood the price that was paid, but this was the soldiers. They were there to defend the state of Israel. I mentioned this because yesterday I saw, despite the fact that a year ago I'd watched Arab social media and saw the brutal and heart-wrenching videos that they were so proudly sharing that day, and so many of them are denying today. But many of this stuff was recorded, and I saw again last night. I don't want to say I made the mistake of looking through it again, because it's very painful, and I've seen a few things in my life. I fought in war, been here during the time of the suicide bombings in Jerusalem. I witnessed part of my job, all these locations of bombings, and I saw things there. But there was never anything as ruthless, as horrific as what occurred on October 7th. And every Israeli knows somebody who was murdered or killed that day or taken hostage. We all have a personal connection to it, even without the videos that we see. If you can't, I do not recommend you seeing these videos. If you can't, listen, I've been through a lot. And in the past 24 hours, once again, I have this feeling in my chest of it's just so horrific things that they did against civilians, against women, against children, the sexual violations, the beatings, and taking pleasure in it. They're cheering. They're speaking of God, raising God's name, Allahu Akbar. It's the only religion in the world. When they come to do horrific things, they praise God for it. And when you see how much pleasure they took in this, and it's not only the terrorists themselves, it's the civilians, both those we know today it was over 6,000 of them who invaded Israel, in addition to the terrorists themselves. But then also those in their cities and towns, when you had bodies of Israelis and Israeli civilians brought in, who they beat, some of them were beaten to death, and they tortured, and there are no words to describe what they were doing. And so when you see these things, you know exactly who we are. We know exactly what they intend to do. And we know that it was the Israelis who were there, that 1,200 Israelis who were along the border, but it could have been each and every one of us. It could have been any Jew, any Israeli, because they also murdered Christians and Muslims. They murdered Black Africans, and they murdered Filipinos and Thai workers. They didn't care. They murdered Muslims, East Jerusalem Muslims. They were in a murder frenzy. But we know as Jews, it could have been every single one of us. It could have been our children. So we know that today. That wasn't so clear 50 years ago with the Yom Kippur War. Now we understand. And when you hear them a year later in Judea and Samaria, the Arabs in Judea and Samaria saying, oh, they support Hamas. Given the opportunity, they'll do it again. The people in Gaza saying and cheering the Iranian missiles against Israel. When you hear people in Lebanon supporting Hamas and Hezbollah, then you know exactly who we're dealing with. And you know exactly what their intentions are. And and they've been saying it to their credit. They were very clear and honest about this for many years. Many of us refused to listen to it. Now we don't have to listen. Now we've seen it. We've saw the evidence, and we know very clearly what they intend to do. And our response to this is very simple. You can speak about peace. You can try to talk about the day after. For the Israelis, the day after was October 7th. And we know what the consequences are if we can't control our borders and our lives. And we're not going to accept that anymore.
Thank you, Danny. Let's talk about the media, if we can. You were formerly the IDF spokesperson and the director of the government's press office. So media is your expertise. I want to talk about the international media and then the local media here in Israel. Let's start with the international media. 1 year into this war, looking over the international media coverage of this war, what can you reflect on a year out?
Basically nothing that is that different than anything they did over the past, I would say 30 to 40 years. I don't want to promote my book, but I wrote a whole book on it, which is called Israel and the Foreign Media. I wanted to call the book, and I've said this before, I wanted to call it The Cradle of Fake News. Nobody wanted to take that title. But the reason being is that we're not only the cradle of the three monotheistic religions here, it's also the fake news and the inappropriate behavior and the failure of Western media. I'm not talking about Arab media, etc. Western media that is supposed to uphold certain principles and values of journalism and objective coverage. Oh, they failed it here. And it was both ideological and personal, meaning they had this ideological belief that, oh, this terrorist organization, because they're wearing suits, suddenly we can believe that they've adopted Western principles. No, they haven't. And the second thing was supporting terrorists and working with terrorists and not informing you, the viewers, the listeners, the readers, that the people they're forced to employ. And now we all know it. But I had to deal with this 20 years ago when I was working with the government press office, when New York Times, BBC, Reuters, AP, every single one of these organizations, if they wanted to have somebody covering in Judea and Samaria, in Gaza, same as Lebanon, even the Kingdom of Jordan, any Arab country, any one of these totalitarian regimes, and it's worse when we're talking about areas controlled by terrorist thugs and by Islamist, extreme Islamism and jihadists. It's even worse. They have to employ their people. And we know this is happening with UNRWA, with the United Nations, with any organization. Anybody that they have in a position of authority is a member of Hamas, is a member of the Palestinian Authority, is a member of Hezbollah in Lebanon. They never hide it. Instead of telling you and all of us, the readers, those who are reading, watching, listening to them, they hide this from us. I even wrote a letter once giving evidence to Reuters about the behavior and the conduct and the fact that their member, we know, is a rank and file member of Hamas. They told us, no, all our employees uphold the professional standards of journalism. And this was not true then. Today, we know it even more. And they even ignored these facts that over these, I mentioned before, the 17 rounds that we had with Hamas in Gaza over the past almost 20 years. Every time they would tell us, oh, you killed journalists. But they never showed the public that these same people that they presented as being their employees and journalists were buried as members of the different Arab terrorist organizations, the Islamic Jihad, the Hamas, the Palestinian this or that. They were buried as members of these organizations, and yet the Western media refused to acknowledge this and were dishonest in their behavior. And that's only in that level. When you're talking about the coverage, which is manipulative, lying, deceiving, and joining the jihadist propaganda. And by the way, it's not only happening here. The fact that they're not informing you of what is happening today in the Sudan or in Nigeria or in Black African countries where Christians are being today, the same thing that we had here on October 7th is happening all over the Christian world in third world countries today. And not to mention the Yazidis, which they had no other choice but to inform you last week of how a 21-year-old who was abducted by the ISIS 10 years ago when she was 11 years old and sold to a member of Hamas in Gaza. How did she get there? They don't tell you that. And the fact that this young girl who was Yazidi, was not Muslim, was forced to marry a jihadist, and she is only one example of thousands, tens of thousands, and the media does not present you with that information. And so you have today, throughout the world, brainwashed, misguided, misinformed youth, your children, who unfortunately are not rising to the occasion. Luckily, we here, our children rose to the occasion. I'm more worried about you right now, October 8th, than I am of the state of Israel.
Danny, I want to put what you just said in context, because a few minutes ago you said that every Israeli was affected by October 7th. This is not like the Yom Kippur War. No one can remove those images from their mind. It has changed Israeli society. And at the same time, you're telling me none of that has made any change on the international media. How is that possible? How can that be?
For too many years, look, if you want to, we can go into the whole historical aspect of anti-Semitism. What they've done is you use the word anti-Semitic. Oh, there they go again. By the way, I had that with a Sky News reporter back in the Second Lebanon War, sitting in the evening, and her telling me, I asked her, how did you feel being here for 3 years? She was about to leave Israel during the war, and she left afterwards. And how did you feel? Oh, you're a despicable people. You're this, you're that. And I was saying to her, look, I was going to say, no, we're only 6 million at that time. We were only 6 million Jews in Israel. I just said 6 million. Oh, there you guys go again, using the Holocaust. No. So they tend to make any of this their own prejudices against the Jewish people. If you raise it and you say, why don't you look at yourself in the mirror? No, we're wrong because we're raising and objecting to them being a racist against us. So what I mean by this is that throughout history, there were always rules and guidelines. Even in liberal societies, when Jews were given emancipation, Jews were given every right except one in many cases. The one thing they were not allowed was the right to self-defense. Jews could not defend themselves. So this has gone from that, and it's merged now into, since we do have a state of Israel, we have an independent Jewish state, we have a presence among the nations, they still apply the same attitudes towards us as they did to Jewish communities or individual Jews throughout history. Jews can do anything, but if they dare stand up for themselves or defend themselves, that is totally unacceptable. So I think this is an extension of that. You find that they have a huge problem when Jews stand up for themselves. Now, when you were asking me before when you were saying, okay, this is a different period and we no longer accept it. And when we said never again, this is what we meant. I can't say this because we try to maintain a level, but don't mess with Israel. I'll use that word. When we say never again, that's what we mean. And if you mess with us, there's a price to pay. You'll find out what we mean by never again. And the same thing happens on this level with this whole coverage of what is going on here and the fact that they don't care. They're more than happy to mourn us and feel sorry for us and keep your pity for yourselves, because you're going to need it, because you'll be 10 times worse than we were, because they've spread throughout your countries. You think that any of them are there, just like Jews moved from Eastern Europe or from Central Europe or from Asia and came to the United States and adopted the American way of life. And we're more than willing to become Americans like by the way, other immigrants who moved to the United States. And we're more than happy to adopt what the United States stands for and means. But what you have today is an invasion of people that even if they arrived legally, they do not accept the Western way of life, the American way of life, the Judeo-Christian values. No, to them, it's an offense. And they, as a religion, they have to oppose it. So you have an invasion right now. You have an invasion in your countries that you're eventually going to have to deal with. We're dealing with our problem right now. We're dealing with it because we have no other chance. For us, it's a question of life and death. And that's what this has become. And so the media, no, they haven't changed because they're incapable of making that change and looking you in the eye and telling you who they are supposed to be serving, all of you. And they're supposed to be providing you with the information to allow you to make decisions. But they're manipulating what today it's easier to ignore them because there are other alternatives. And it's not just the mainstream media as it existed before, but that hasn't made the mainstream media change. It's only made them buckle down and try to be more deceptive in their coverage and them telling you what to think.
Danny, we're running out of time. I want to get your opinion on the Israeli media, but before you answer that question, I just want to thank all of our viewers for watching this briefing. Whether you're watching on the live Zoom briefing, you're sending in all of your questions that really help guide these conversations, or you're watching on YouTube. And if you are watching on YouTube, consider subscribing to this channel, consider sharing the briefings so that we can really get the truth out. And I have good news for all of our viewers, because everyone loves it when Danny comes on the briefing and we can always see it in all the comments coming in. And Danny, you're getting ready to travel to the States. You're going to be in the US, in the northeast of the US in the beginning of November, second week of November. So for everyone listening, if you're interested in bringing Danny Seaman to your community, to your synagogue, your church, your community center, whatever entity that you have, you can reach out to Danny. You can reach out to me. Danny, I'm going to put your email in the Zoom chat and people can directly contact you. Everyone has my email address, sends me emails all the time. You're welcome to reach out to me if you'd like to hear Danny in person, because he is animated and he has a lot of energy when he's two-dimensional in these briefings. But I promise you, I know this from personal experience, in the live flesh and blood, there's a lot more energy. Okay, Danny, last question, and we really are running out of time. You spoke about the international media, the local Israeli media, without going into every single channel, because we just have a few minutes left. How is the local Israeli media impacting the resilience, the resolve, the spirit of Israelis right now?
Unfortunately, we have the same problem here as you have elsewhere with this left-leaning media who are opposed to the government here. You may hear about it because the foreign media echoes what they're getting from here. And by the way, the American administration is also working very closely with the left-wing media in Israel, and they're feeding each other. But we have other alternatives here. And one of the things I'm working on and trying to get is Israel Channel 14, which is more representative of the Israeli public here, trying to get them to create content in English. so that we can bring how Israelis feel. And they've had very huge impact on the feelings and attitudes of Israelis, because most Israeli people want the government to complete and finish the job. And then you have the voice that is being presented through some media outlets in Israel that unfortunately gets an expression. It's Haaretz newspaper and some of the other channels that are very close-knitted and connected to the other media organizations here, the foreign media, and they sort of echo each other. I wouldn't pay attention to that so much. Listen to your Israeli friends. Listen to the IDSF. Moshe has done a great job in the past year and getting this information out there. And just so you know that it's very different than what you're getting on the media. Israelis have been alert to it, and the attitudes here have changed, just so you know that that's how we feel. And by the way, I'm more than happy to go around the United States. I don't have a schedule beyond the Springfield, Massachusetts area right now. So we'll see. I may come in a little early because, being a Mets fan, I'm hoping they make the World Series, but that's a whole different issue.
Danny, always a pleasure speaking with you and learning from you. Thank you so much for joining in this briefing. Thank you to all of our viewers. Thank you to all of our supporters for tuning in. We will be back with you tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. here in Israel. Until then, stay safe, stay strong. Take care, everyone.
Hatima tova. Thank you all.